медіацентром отут.
Ні, я маю на увазі, що раніше ж були ці столи, крісла.
Ну отак зараз, бо тут онлайн більшість, а все, що столи, це наверху. А давно
вже так провели?
Ну от я півроку так точно. Рік, так.
Через декілька днів буде.
Кожного дня.
Вася сказав, 14 березня в нас рік.
Ну, не тут рік ми починали, не тут, але буде травня.
1 травня десь, так.
От сьогодні аж 6 присух.
У мене не світиться екран. Скажи мені, будь ласка.
Олеже. Добрий день, я вітаю всіх.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Tomanova and Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum starts its operation today. It's been 9 years of the war and it's day 379 of the full-scale invasion of Russian aggressor. And I want to traditionally thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this war. A brief schedule of events for today is as follows. At 12 o'clock, joining us in the studio will be Vadim Boychenko, the mayor of Mariupol, and we will be talking about the situation over there. At 1 o'clock, joining us will be Yuri Ignat, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and we will be talking about the massive missile attack inflicted by the Russians this night. At 13:30, joining us online will be Maxim Kozitsky, the military governor of Lviv, and we will talk about the aftermath of the night attack on Lviv region. And at 1500, joining us in the studio will be Oleg Korykov, the Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety of Ukraine, and we will be talking about the situation in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. At 5 o'clock, joining us online will be Serhiy Sukhomlin, the mayor of Zhytomyr, and we will be talking about the consequences of the night attack on Zhytomyr region. And joining us online right now is Serhiy Haidai, the head of Luhansk Regional Military Administration. Good morning, Mr. Serhiy. Good morning. Mr. Serhiy, please tell us what is the situation over there in Luhansk region. Is there any advancement in liberation of our territories? Maybe you have any information about that. Well, the situation is under control by our defense forces, however, not so easy. The Russian occupation forces try to conduct offensive from all the directions, from Svatovsk, Kupiansk, Kremensky, and from the direction of Belogorivka. They involve aviation, heavy material, and sometimes the infantry offensive is accompanied by a large number of tanks and other support vehicles. And we experience incessant shellings of all the settlements along the front lines. But talking about today specifically, today it's more or less quiet, but it happens on a regular basis after a couple of waves of enemy's offensive when their attacks get repelled, so they withdraw to replenish their reserves of personnel and vehicles that they keep losing. Well, talking about the last week, did the situation change in principle, or is it stable and under control? No, there is no advance of the enemy. The situation is stable and under full control by our defense forces. And talking about the citizens who remain in the occupied territories of Luhansk region. What do we know about them? What are the conditions they live in? How is the humanitarian situation over there? Maybe we know anything about the war crimes being committed by the Russians. Well, about the attitude of Russians to the local population, their attitude becomes worse and worse every day. They see their losses, they see that they have no support. There is no rest for them, even in the rear of the occupied Luhansk region. Their barracks are being blown up even in the long distance from the front lines, from the forward edge, and their convoys are getting exploded, and sometimes where they keep their vehicles from the distance from the forward edge, they keep losing it even deep in the rear. So the occupiers waste all their hatred on the local population. They keep looting, there is a maraudery going on, pillages, and people in the settlements along the front lines are getting evicted from their dwellings, and their housing is being occupied by the Russian occupational forces. About the humanitarian situation, well, there was no stable supply of gas, water, and electric powers, so all those problems still persist. The occupiers promised they would repair anything, but we understand that's all lies, and people see all of it. As to the healthcare, it's a huge problem for local population, because any services that can be provided, they can be provided only for those who are in critical condition. If people have something like flu or just some regular chronic diseases, they would not be accepted by any hospitals. And on top of that, all the modern medical equipment was stolen and brought somewhere to Russian Federation from Luhansk region. So what about their wounded ones? Do they evacuate them right away, or do they treat them in our hospitals? Yes, this is exactly how it happens. We repaired those hospitals before the invasion, we provided it with the up-to-date medical equipment, and this is what they use for treatment of their wounded. All of it was pillaged, and it was carried away in the direction of Luhansk, and all those hospitals are now re-equipped for treating of Russian military, and all of them, they stay in those hospitals, even not the wounded ones, and the local population is not being admitted to those hospitals. But in case of some heavy injuries, they cannot treat them in the Luhansk region, except for the city of Luhansk itself. There is only one X-ray machine left in Haidai, and if Russian military get heavily wounded, they usually transform from 300 to 200 status on their way to Luhansk for treatment. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions on the floor, please go ahead. Well, we've heard about the murders and rapings by the occupiers in the Luhansk region, but what can you say about the pillages of any cultural values? For example, what is the condition of dramatic theater in Severodonetsk and in Lysychansk? Is there any accounting, and does anybody keeps track of what's going on with those cultural values? Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, we don't have access to the temporarily occupied territory, and no international organizations are not admitted there either. So we cannot document what's going on in this or that settlement, in this or that cultural institution. or whether it's an educational institution or a healthcare facility. Unfortunately, we don't have such an opportunity now. But since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, since the 24th of February, when we were still located in Luhansk region, we were witnessing the destruction going on in our cities, towns and villages. Unfortunately, the theater in Severodonetsk is destroyed. The Belgian heritage was also destroyed by the Russian occupational forces. And Mr. Serhiy, another question about the dynamics of the presence of occupiers in Luhansk region. Do you observe their numbers increasing or reducing? What can we actually observe, and what can we tell about that? What does it tell us about their reserves? Yeah, they keep adding their reserves. The presence of personnel increases on a regular basis from the direction of Luhansk, but every day our defense forces reduce their numbers, and they reduce it substantially. So there is some parity in this regard. I hope our defense forces will keep reducing the number of occupiers, and we will keep helping us, because we're in constant touch. Me and my team, we're going along the front lines. We communicate with our units in Kremene, Bilogorivsk direction, and we try to supply them with everything that we can, so that they can reduce the number of occupational forces in the most efficient manner. Another question on the floor: there is information about the constant shelling of Chervonopopivka by Russian occupational forces, but that settlement was never mentioned as deoccupied territory, if it's not classified information. So whose this settlement is for the time being? What's its status? Well, it's not classified. There is an active warfare going on in that territory. There are constant clashes, regular clashes near that settlement, along with the constant shellings. As you mentioned, it's not being assigned the status of deoccupied, because we cannot only mention it as deoccupied if we have fire control over it. The situation is quite dynamic there, and sometimes our units were entering it and clearing the settlement, but sometimes they had to withdraw. For the time being, I cannot say it's fully deoccupied, but the situation over there is stable. No one moves the front line in any direction in that sector. It's pretty good for us, because in view of the pressure of Russian occupational forces in that direction, we maintain the front line for a long time, and our defenders hold the line. So I think we should wait a little bit and then proceed to counter-offensive. Thank you, Mr. Serhiy, for joining our broadcast. Dear colleagues, I'm reminded you joining us was Serhiy Haidai, the military governor of Luhansk region. Our next briefing is in 15 minutes, and we will talk about the situation in Mariupol, so bear with us. Trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.